car crash. I'm not sure if this is the right place to post this, but it's something that happened a couple of years ago, and I think about it non-stop. My ex-brother-in-law was getting married on Mackinac Island, so we all had to drive out there. My ex-wife, son, and mother-in-law left a day before me because I had to work for a few hours and take the dogs to the kennel before starting the 6+ hour drive. On the way back from the wedding, something happened that I still can't fully understand, and I replay it in my head constantly. I was driving my 2014 Jeep Wrangler and reached over to grab a drink on the passenger seat. The bottle rolled away, so I reached further, which caused me to accidentally pull the steering wheel to the side. I realized I was veering off the road and tried to correct it. But between overcorrecting, my speed, 80+ mph on a road in the middle of nowhere in the Upper Peninsula, and the fact that I was driving a Jeep, I lost control and flipped it. I remember rolling over a couple of times, the Jeep going into the woods on the side of the road. I can still hear the sound of small pine trees snapping, and smell the earth as I finally came to a stop. At first, I registered intense pain, but then it seemed to fade away. I remember lying in the wreckage, fully convinced I was going to die, and that I'd never see my son again. I panicked for a few seconds, trying to move but couldn't. Then, suddenly a calm came over me, and I accepted that it was okay. I would be okay, and my son would be okay, even if I died. And then, just as suddenly, it was as if none of it had happened. I was back in the Jeep, steering and correcting the vehicle safely as I pulled over to the side of the road. I remember feeling like I was having a panic attack, pale as a ghost and drenched in sweat. I pulled myself together, got back in the Jeep, and drove for a while. Once I reached a small town outside the national park, I stopped and drank a lot of coffee. After a while, I finished the drive home. When I told my ex-wife about it, she thought I was teasing her. My best friend thinks I must have fallen asleep while driving and dreamt it all. But I know it happened. I can still feel the weightlessness as the Jeep rolled, hear the deafening sound of metal crashing into trees, and remember the sheer panic followed by that strange, peaceful acceptance. I got stuck in the summer of 1986. I have the same routine every day. I wake up around 5 a.m., grab a quick bite, watch a little TV, then get dressed and head to work. I live with one roommate, and we've been sharing this apartment for about 2 years. So, about 7 months ago, back in February, something really strange happened. That morning, as soon as I got up, everything felt off. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but the whole vibe was creepy. Then, I noticed something odd on the kitchen counter. A tray of American flag napkins, homemade cookies shaped like stars with red and blue icing, and what looked like some cheap, off-brand M&Ms. It struck me as weird because it was still winter. Why would my roommate be putting out 4th of July stuff? I brushed it off, made myself some food, and turned on the TV. That's when things got even weirder. Instead of my usual streaming apps, all I could get were random, old-school TV channels. The commercials were grainy, the news anchors had big 80s hair, and then one ad popped up talking about a 4th of July sale. At this point, I was seriously confused. I finally found a weather channel, and in the corner of the screen, the date read, July 3rd, 1986. I thought maybe I'd somehow landed on a nostalgia channel, but every single channel I flipped through had the same old commercials and TV shows. It was all from the 80s. Now, I was born in 2003, so I don't know much about 80s stuff, but even I could tell this wasn't normal. Starting to freak out, I tried to call my mom, thinking maybe she could help me figure this out. But when I dialed her number, my phone just kept trying to connect, never actually ringing. Now, I was really panicking. I decided to wake up my roommate, but on the way to her room, I stopped dead in my tracks. There, in the hallway, was an old woman, maybe in her late 70s, carrying a tray. She walked from my roommate's room into my room and then just vanished. She didn't look like a ghost. I mean, I've never seen a ghost, so who knows? But she seemed like a totally normal person. At this point, panic didn't even begin to cover what I was feeling. I ran into my roommate's room flipping out and woke her up. I explained everything, fully expecting her to think I'd lost my mind. But instead, she got up and wanted to see for herself. When we went back to the kitchen, the 4th of July stuff was gone, and the TV was back to normal. No old shows, no weird commercials. Everything was like it had never happened. The strange thing is, she believes me. She didn't see any of it herself, but she's convinced something happened. We still talk about it sometimes, wondering if it'll happen again to either of us. I can't shake the feeling that maybe there was some kind of time glitch. It still freaks me out whenever I think about it. Mysterious ski trip incident. This is a story I haven't shared with many people, mostly because I worry everyone will think I'm crazy. When I was 16, I went on a school ski trip. Living in Australia, where snow is rare, we had to take an 18-hour bus ride down south to reach the snow. I was with my friends, and we were excited to go snowboarding. But on just the second day of the trip, something happened that would change my life forever. Since most of us were inexperienced at snowboarding, we stuck with the instructors from the snow lodge, moving down the slopes in one large group. The slopes ranged in difficulty depending on your experience, and since I had none, I stayed with the beginner group. I ended up at the very back of the group as we snowboarded down. Everyone began turning around a large bend on the mountain, and because I was a few seconds behind, I made the turn later than the rest. It was a beautiful sunny day, and the slopes were crowded, not just with our school group, but with other skiers and snowboarders too. But as soon as I rounded the bend, everyone was gone. All the people who had been in front of me had disappeared. Even those who had been behind me, people who weren't part of our group, had vanished. It didn't make any sense. I should have still seen them, as it was a long, straight slope after the turn. But I was suddenly completely alone. I was confused and shocked. I pulled out my phone to call my best friend, who was also on the trip. I distinctly remember my phone having about 75% charge, but the moment I tried to unlock it, the screen went black, and the low battery symbol popped up. It made no sense. Desperate to rationalize what had happened, I told myself that maybe everyone had somehow sped ahead of me, or past me, without my noticing. I kept snowboarding down the hill, hoping to reach the bottom. But there was no bottom. There was no end to this course, or whatever strange alternate reality I had stumbled into. Being a beginner, I kept falling, and eventually, I gave up. I unstrapped my snowboard and started walking. Walking in the snow was exhausting, like trudging through sand, and I was carrying a heavy snowboard. After what felt like hours, I came across what looked like an old abandoned ski lift. It was rusty, creaky, and eerie, but I figured my best bet was to take it to get a better view of the area. As I rode the ski lift, all I could see were trees and snow in every direction. The sun was setting, and the darkness was creeping in fast. I started to panic. I was on a beginner slope, which should have been near the main area with cafes, restaurants, and bars. Yet here I was, completely isolated. I had no idea what to do. I was terrified and started sobbing. I truly believed I might die out there. I just wanted to see my mom. To make things worse, the ski lift didn't take me to a proper destination. There was no platform or station waiting at the end. It dropped me off in the middle of nowhere. The cabin where we were staying required us to take a shuttle bus and an underground subway to reach the main ski area. As darkness fell, it became nearly impossible to see. There were no lights, and without my phone's flashlight, I could barely make out what was in front of me. Just when I was ready to give up, I noticed a faint, glowing light in the distance. I followed it and eventually found a tunnel with a staircase leading down. At the bottom was an underground subway station. How it was there, I have no idea. It made no sense to have a station in the middle of nowhere. But sure enough, a subway came and I got on it. It took me to the shuttle buses, and from there I made my way back to the cabin. When I walked in, all the school kids and teachers were casually having dinner, as if nothing had happened. I asked if anyone had been looking for me, and their responses were unsettlingly nonchalant. They just said, "Oh, hey, Chloe, there you are," as if they hadn't noticed I'd been missing. It was like they couldn't grasp the seriousness of what I was saying. The whole situation felt off, almost like they were hearing me through a filter. For the rest of the trip, I stayed in the cabin, refusing to go back out. Even after returning home, things felt subtly different. Objects in my room seemed to have moved, but not in a way that suggested someone else had rearranged them. It felt as though they had always been in their new spots, even though I knew they hadn't. Time felt slightly altered too. Everything was just off. When I told my sister this story years later, she suggested that I might have quantum jumped, ending up in a different timeline. She even said that in another reality, our family could be grieving the version of me that got lost in the snow. It's a haunting and sad thought, but it's the only way I can make sense of what happened. Egg glitch. Every morning at work, we have a simple breakfast laid out. Just a small buffet of eggs, bacon, and the like. It's nothing extravagant, meant to feed around a dozen people. I'm usually one of the first from my team to arrive, and as usual, the kitchen was empty when I walked in. On the counter was a ceramic egg tray, like the bottom half of an egg carton, with 12 warm, freshly boiled eggs. I took one, walked over to the garbage bin, peeled it, and then walked back to the tray, and stopped in my tracks. There were 12 eggs in the tray again. No one had entered the kitchen while I was peeling the egg, and when I touched the new egg, it was just as warm as the others. It wasn't anything dramatic, just very odd, since you don't come across mysterious eggs from a parallel universe every day. I peeled and ate that one too. TLDR. Found a strange quantum egg at breakfast. Ate it. No superpowers. The parallel universe answering machine. This happened about 15 years ago. I called my friend, but he wasn't home, so I left a message on his answering machine. I said, "Hey, it's me. Sorry I missed you. I'll call you later. Bye." Then I hung up and left the house. I made no other calls that day. Later, my friend called me back and said, "Wow, that was quite the message you left. Who was that girl you were talking to?" I was confused and asked, "What are you talking about? I wasn't talking to any girl." As it turns out, the message didn't end after I said bye. I went over to his house to listen to the message a few times, and after the initial message I left, there was a slight pause. Then, the recording continued for another 30 to 40 seconds with me talking to a girl. It was my voice, but it was a conversation I never had, with a girl whose voice I didn't recognize. The strange part is that the voice in the extended part of the message sounded exactly like mine. Not just the tone, but the mannerisms and speech patterns were identical. In the conversation, I was talking about going skiing, but mentioned I had to go down to my shop and work on a car first, which perfectly matched my real-life situation at the time. Then, the message just ended. It was recorded on one of those digital answering machines that stored messages on a chip, so there was no tape I could have analyzed. Also, neither my friend nor I had a party line, so that couldn't explain it either. It was a very unsettling experience, and I have no explanation for it. I may have somehow connected to an alternate universe through a telephone answering machine. Time loops and seeing my sister twice. The story I'm about to share happened to me about 15 years ago, and I swear it's 100% true. To this day, I still can't explain what happened. I've changed the names for privacy. When I was 15, my family moved into an old rental house. It had a strange energy. Something about it always felt eerie, even during the day. The house was beautiful, though, and had belonged to an elderly widow, Mrs. Martin, who had been an opera singer and an arts professor. Her children rented the house to us, but they left all of her belongings behind, as if she had just passed away. They didn't even clean out the fridge. It was bizarre. Mrs. Martin became sort of a figure we'd reference often, as though she were still part of the house. Oh, and the attic was infested with bats, which just added to the creepy vibe. I never liked staying there alone. One night, I was home with my best friend Mallory, also 15, her younger sister Olive, 13, and my little sister Emma, 11. Mallory and I were in the living room watching a movie, while Olive and Emma were in the den, a small room connected to the living room, watching TV. There were no adults home at the time. At some point, Emma decided to go upstairs to take a shower. To get to the bathroom, she had to walk through the living room, which she did. After her shower, about 30 minutes later, Emma came back down in a white towel. She stopped on the 6th step of the staircase, waved at us, and said, "Hey guys." We acknowledged her with a friendly greeting, and she continued walking down the stairs, past Mallory and me, and went into the den to get dressed. We didn't think much of it. Maybe 2 to 5 minutes later, as Mallory and I were still in the living room, and Olive and presumably Emma were in the den, we heard the same, "Hey guys," from behind us. We turned around, and there was Emma, again, standing on the 6th step, in the same towel, waving at us with the same inflection and tone as before. Mallory and I froze, then looked at each other in absolute horror. We both knew something was wrong, and without saying a word, we bolted to the den, threw open the door, and found Olive inside, alone. Emma followed closely behind us, asking, "What's going on?" We immediately started questioning them. "Emma, didn't you just walk down here a couple of minutes ago?" "Olive, didn't Emma come into the den already?" Emma swore she had only come downstairs once, and Olive insisted Emma had never entered the den before we all rushed in. And we knew there was no way Emma could have gone back upstairs without passing through the living room again. Both girls were genuinely confused and starting to get scared. So Mallory and I decided to brush it off, pretending we were just messing with them. We returned to the living room in stunned silence. I remember asking Mallory, "You saw that too, right?" She nodded, and we never spoke about it again. I didn't even tell my parents or sister about the incident until a few years ago. When I brought it up, my sister had no memory of it at all. I haven't spoken to Mallory since high school, so I don't know if she still remembers it, but I'll never forget the look of shock on her face when Emma came down the stairs for the second time. If Mallory hadn't been there to witness it, I probably would have thought I imagined the whole thing. To this day, the event creeps me out. Over the years, I've read stories about glitches in the Matrix and time loops where people experience the same event twice in close succession. I believe that's what Mallory and I experienced with my sister that night. We only lived in that house for a year before my parents bought another home. Last year, my sister went back to visit the town and drove by the old house. Apparently, it's been split into 2 separate rental units for college students. We both agreed that whatever strange energy was in that house probably wasn't happy about being split in 2. So, that's my glitch in the Matrix story. Like I said, it's all true, whether you believe it or not. Glitches I've experienced at work. These are my personal stories and not stories from Reddit. I work as a process operator, and over the years I've worked at several different companies. At each one, I've encountered something strange, but there are a few events that have really stuck with me. This one happened over 10 years ago. At my first job, we were loading trucks with a highly flammable substance. Since I was still an intern at the time, I wasn't allowed to help out due to the risk. I was standing on the roof of the factory, which gave me a good view of the loading area and the surroundings. I was just looking around at my surroundings. It was a night shift, and everything seemed normal. Then, I noticed something odd. I saw a colleague walking around one of the trucks. As I watched, it looked like he slowly started to disappear, almost like he was turning into a ghost or becoming invisible. A few seconds later, I saw him again, walking around the same truck in the exact same way. But this time, he didn't disappear. It was as if I had seen a glimpse of the future that briefly vanished, and then reality played out afterward. At first, I thought it was just my tired mind playing tricks on me, given it was a night shift. But it was really unsettling to see someone vanish, only to reappear moments later and continue as if nothing had happened. It was one of the strangest experiences I've ever had. Another bizarre incident happened at a different factory I worked at many years later. We had an elevator inside the building, but because I'm quite introverted, I usually preferred to take the stairs if someone else was using the elevator. One day, I saw a person walking ahead of me toward the elevator. I was walking behind him at an angle, watching to see which way he'd go. I saw them open the elevator doors and step inside. I was about to head for the stairs when something strange caught my attention. The elevator never went down. Normally, the moment someone steps into the elevator, it starts moving. But this time, nothing happened. I stood there for a few seconds, watching, but the elevator remained still. Curious, I went over to take a look inside, and to my surprise, the elevator was empty. I was certain I had just seen someone walk into the elevator. He had a particular way of walking, broad and confident, unlike any of my coworkers, many of whom were in their 60s and didn't walk like that. But now the elevator was completely empty. I have no idea who that person could have been, but it was a deeply unsettling moment because I clearly saw someone, and yet he was gone. Both of these experiences still haunt me, especially because I can't find any logical explanation for them. Whether they were glitches in reality or just tricks of my mind, I don't know, but they are moments I will never forget. I saw something appear out of nowhere. This is my glitch story, and I still think about it from time to time. I've never been able to come up with an explanation for how it happened. When I was 19, not too long ago, I spent the summer working at a scout camp, managing an archery range. Both scouts and their parents were on the firing line, shooting the compound bows we provided. I was in charge of the range, which included responsibilities like ensuring safety, maintaining inventory, and keeping the bows in working condition. While they were shooting, I was walking up and down the line behind them. Out of the corner of my eye, I suddenly saw a black plastic cable guard fall to the ground and bounce between a father and his son, both of whom were actively firing their bows. For context, a plastic cable guard is securely attached to a compound bow. It wraps around metal and guides at least 2 strings from the bow. Without it, a compound bow would only be able to fire once or twice before breaking. Also, no compound bow in our inventory could hold more than 1 cable guard at a time. When I saw it fall, I immediately went over and picked it up. I asked the scout and his father to stop shooting so I could replace the cable guard that had supposedly fallen off their bow. However, when I checked, both of their bows still had their cable guards securely attached. In fact, every bow on the firing line had its cable guard intact, and when I checked the equipment shed later, all the spares had theirs too. At the start of the summer, I had taken a full inventory of all the equipment, and this cable guard wasn't part of it. Since a bow can't have 2 cable guards, and I clearly saw one fall to the ground, I was completely stumped as to how it appeared.